This video's GVC is I can model, use, or explain the four operations, addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division with rational numbers. The specific learning target is I can calculate and interpret integers using addition. This video objective today is going to go over absolute value, what it is, and how to calculate with it. So what is absolute value? Absolute value refers to the distance that a number is from 0. An integer inside the absolute value brackets always comes out as a positive. The absolute value brackets are a straight up and down line, as you see here. Please don't confuse parentheses as absolute value. Not absolute. I have a lot of students that get confused with that. So, if there is a number in between straight brackets up and down, then you need to think about the distance that that number is from 0. So if you look at negative 3 is 1, 2, 3 units away from 0. So the absolute value of negative 3, the distance that negative 3 is from 0, is 3. 3, here on the right, is 1, 2, 3 units away from 0. And so we say that the absolute value, in other words, the distance that that number is from 0, is 3. So, absolute value. I told you we'd be using number lines quite a bit, and here it is again on the number line. When we were just using numbers like integers, the positive represents a direction that takes us right. And the negative represents the opposite direction, the distance or the direction going left. The absolute value represents a distance from 0, and a distance from 0 is always positive. Here's what I mean. Let's say you live from the school 7 blocks, but you live west 7 blocks from the school. Your friend lives 7 blocks east of the school on the same road. So let's assume that they're the same distance of blocks and that they're the same road, and you walk to school. You walk to school and your friend walks to school. Who walked further to get to school? Well, the answer is clearly you both walked the same distance. As you traveled back to school, you both walked 7 blocks. So whether you're starting at a negative and working your way to 0, or starting at a positive and working your way to 0, the distance will always be positive. So let's do a few. I'll do 2 as a model, and then I'll have you do the rest. The absolute value of negative 8, I want you to think about that. The absolute value of negative 8 is how far negative 8 is from 0. Negative 8 is 8 units away from 0. So the absolute value of negative 8 is equal to 8. Okay, next one, the absolute value of 5. Well, 5 is just 5 units away from 0, so the absolute value of 5 is 5 units away. All right, go ahead and try this one on your own. The absolute value of negative 17 is 17 units away. Okay, sometimes you'll see the word simplify the expression. And when we have an absolute value, this is an expression. It's really just the same as these 3 over here. These are expressions. You just evaluated them. But simplify and evaluate mean the same thing mathematically. I will do these 2, and then I'll have you try the third one. When you have a negative outside of the absolute value, we don't use that inside of the absolute value. So what we do first is we work our way inside out. So what is the absolute value of negative 6? That is 6 units away from 0. But I can't leave this, so I have to bring it down with me. And since that was outside of the absolute value, the negative stays there. So my answer to the simplified expression is -6. This one can be a little bit tricky, but 0 is exactly 0 units away from 0. So the absolute value of 0 is always 0. All right, go ahead and try this one on your own. Yes, remember that the absolute value of 7 is 7, but I have a negative out front. With this negative, since it's outside of the absolute value, it just comes down as part of the solution, or part of the final simplified answer. Let's look at 3 more examples. These are what we call inequalities, or equalities, I guess you could say that. One is less than, greater than, or equal to, and we have to decide which one is bigger. So, would you rather have 2, or would you rather have the absolute value of -5? Well, 2 is just 2, but the absolute value of -5 is actually 5. So I would rather have 5 than 2. Okay. Would you rather have -4 or the absolute value of -6? Well, -4 is just -4, and the absolute value of -6 actually becomes 6. So would you rather have -$4 or positive $6? I would rather have positive $6. Go ahead and try this one on your own. This one may be a little bit tricky for some of you, but the absolute value of 5 is just 5. The absolute value of -5 is also 5. They're both the same distance away from 0. So when I take the absolute value of both of these, my answer is actually equal to. To just address some common misunderstandings, some students thought that, this is what we've seen in years past, that the absolute value of -5 is 10, because as they were looking at this, they thought that the absolute value was the distance away from its opposite, but that is not true. Okay, so the absolute value of -5 would just be 5. Another thing that a lot of students believe is they say the absolute value of 5 is -5 because they think that the absolute value means opposite, but that is not what the absolute value means. That is not true. A lot of students saw this and thought, oh, the absolute value of -5 is 5. That must mean that the opposite is true. But that's not true. You want to watch that carefully. Okay. The last thing we need to address simply is 0 a positive or negative? And to make this discussion short, we will just say the answer is neither. 0 is not positive. 0 is not negative. It is the only number we have that is neutral.